let's take a look and see this thing called financial aid. Now, even if you're very wealthy, it's a pretty good idea to pay attention to the next bit here so I can teach you how to navigate some of the things to help you pay for college. When you apply for financial aid, there are 3 reasons why you apply for aid. The first and most obvious reason is you fill out a financial aid form when the time comes, which is usually halfway through the senior year of high school, and you put all kinds of stuff about your income and your assets in the form, and you send that form electronically into a processing center, which does one thing and one thing only. Based upon what you wrote on the form, it determines how much money your family can afford to pay for 1 year of college. And that's called the expected family contribution, or the EFC. That's the only thing it does. And I'll show you how that fits into a larger formula later on. By the way, I need to tell you something. I have clients making over $300,000 who actually qualify for need-based financial aid. So just because you make a lot of money doesn't mean you're not going to qualify for financial aid. So that's the most obvious reason. The second reason is this. Just because some fancy federal formula says you can afford X number of dollars doesn't make it so. Maybe you can't afford it. Maybe you don't want to afford it because in order to afford it, you've got to cash in some very good investments and maybe take a capital gains hit. Maybe you just don't want to get rid of that investment. So one of the automatic results of filling out the form is that everyone in this room will open up a line of credit with the federal government that will allow you to borrow as much unsecured, relatively cheap money as you need to pay your out-of-pocket costs for college. So sometimes people use that as, instead of cashing in their stuff, they use that and then use that investment that they have percolating away to actually service this loan over a longer period of time, so that when they're done, the original investment is still in the bank and still in the family where it belongs. The third reason is this. Suppose you're making $300,000 and you're doing fine, and then your student's off at some college, maybe a $60,000 college, and in November of the first year of college, the primary wage earner in your family goes to the job or goes to work, and there's a pink slip waiting for you. And now you're staring at your income going from X to 1/4 X. What are you going to do then? Well, if you don't have a financial aid form on file at the college your kid is going to, the what then is you pick up the phone, call your student, tell them to come home because you can't afford college anymore. But if you have a financial aid form on file at your student's college, the phone call goes to the financial aid administrator, and you say, I want to report special circumstance, loss of income. And what they'll ask you to do is to fill out a form suggesting what your income will be, and you'll send that to them, and then they're allowed under law to recalculate, right there on campus, to recalculate your ability to pay based on your projected income under these new conditions rather than your past income when you're fully employed. So it's always a good idea to have on file at your college, no matter how much money you make, no matter how much money you have in the bank, it's a good idea to have one of these forms on file every year at the school your son or daughter attends as a safety net under everybody, so that if something bad happens, your student will be able to stay at that college, provided he or she goes to class once in a while and does work. It's important that you understand how, this whole thing of financial aid. If you look at the pie chart, there's 2 slices there. The little slice is called merit-based scholarships, merit-based aid. It has nothing to do with your income. It has nothing to do with your assets. It may have something to do with your background and the talent in your student or something like that. And if you look at the slice of the pie, it's a pretty small slice. And typically, those merit-based scholarships are fairly small, usually $500 to $1,000. There's some bigger ones, but they're few and far between, and they're very competitive, so you might as well use your money to play the lottery to get them. And the other thing about that, if you look at this pie chart, it's a tiny piece of the financial aid pie. So if you're going to focus on that, you're looking at the small slice of the pie. And typically, those merit scholarships are what they call non-renewable. That is, if you get them 1 year, you're not going to qualify to get them year 2, year 3, and year 4. So planning to pay for college by looking at merit-based scholarship may be a little like going to Reno once a year, and if you get lucky, you dodge the bullet 1 year, but the next year you're right back at square one. So it's not a very reliable planning feature. If you look at the big chunk of the pie, there's arguably 110 to 130 billion dollars, depending on whose article you read, of need-based aid. As the name suggested, if you can demonstrate financial need for college, And if your situation stays about the same for all 4 years, the nice thing about need-based aid is you're likely to get the same level of support to help you pay for college for all 4 years. So it's a much more reliable way to get aid. It's much easier to get aid, and it's, as I said earlier, it's predictable. So we're going to talk a bit about the need-based part of that. If you want to find out merit-based scholarships and you want to get a quick survey of it, there's a website called FastWeb. And FastWeb, if you get on that site, it's a portal to about 450,000 scholarships. I've known maybe 1 or 2 people that have actually gotten scholarships there. I think if you want to look for merit-based scholarships or any scholarships that are not through the school, a good place to look is here locally. You want to go to the Career Center, either Mountain View High School or Los Altos High School every year, and check to see the availability of local scholarships. They're not very big, but they're a lot more doable and more likely to get it. So that's the lay of the land on the amount of money. The 2 forms you need to know, and these are the paper copies. This is the FAFSA. FAFSA stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. You should do it online because it's much faster to do it online, and the turnaround is really, really quick. When you go online, you'll see a number of FAFSA websites. One is FAFSA.com, and it's listed first on the Google search. A lot of people just instinctively do that, and then they find out they get help filling out the form and everything. Then there's a thing that says, well, before we'll process this, you got to write us a check or give us a credit card for $39 or something like that. And they get people, and by the time they're done, they say, I don't care about them, I'll pay them. And they make a lot of money doing that. The federal government has its hands thrown up in the air. We don't know how to control this. This is terrible. Well, to give you some insight as to the capability of the Department of Education, the way to take care of that is really simple. I'm amazed they can't figure it out. What you do is you get 2 people in a room in the Department of Education, you change the name of the form, and then you get all the URLs, and that's the end of the competition. But they haven't been able to figure that out over the years. But if they can't figure that, it makes me a little frightened about what they can figure out. So that's one form. A second form is the CSS profile. That's a form that about 20% of the private colleges require. It's like FAFSA heavy. They ask a lot more questions and a lot more detail. It's a form brought to you by our friends at the College Board that has a pre-college monopoly that OPEC would be proud of. If you're in a freshman or sophomore, you don't quite know the impact of the College Board, but you might as well get a stamp that has for your checks because it says College Board. You can be writing a lot of those. SATs, PSATs, the profile, AP courses, all that stuff all goes to the College Board. It's a pretty good business. They're pretty similar forms, except, as I said, the profile is really in much greater detail than the FAFSA.